Hello, everybody. This is the 6th episode of the Enlightened Misanthrope. I was going to say, we're really chugging along, but I think I've said that like 3 times already, so I don't know. I'm just kind of genuinely surprised that after 6 weeks I'm still doing this. I was listening to an episode of Bill Burr's podcast. He's a comedian, for those of you who don't know, and he does what's called the Monday Morning Podcast. He was doing it for, I think he started it in 2008, he was doing it on MySpace. It was so long ago that he started. And he talked about how people who look at their numbers and stuff are idiots and all this other stuff. It was one of his, on Thursdays, he plays past episodes, and I think this was like from 2010. It might have been in that same episode. I know it was a Thursday one because he checks in on us, checks in on the listeners on Thursday, and he said that he was surprised. He didn't really understand why people looked at the numbers. I don't necessarily look at the numbers, but because every time I do, I'm confused as to what the fucking impression is. And I mean, I've read the stuff and I kind of get it, but I don't know why it's worth tracking. You know what I mean? But for those of you who are listening to this, I greatly appreciate it. And like I said, I'm kind of surprised after 6 weeks I'm still doing this, but I got a lot to say, so I guess it makes sense. I wanted to start this week. Those of you who've listened to the podcast know that I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. And we kind of had, as fans of the Packers, a big problem this last weekend. The Packers decided to, I really don't know what they decided to do, but the defense decided to step up for most of the game. I mean, they kind of, it was a long game and they were on the field. And, that offense was going to break out at some point, but They played really well. The offense did okay. They were better than expected. The offensive line played pretty well. And they had a big mistake at the end of the game, and everybody looked at this as a nexus point. Like, there was a guy I was talking to on Twitter who, we were going back and forth about what my actual topic is, but his username was hashtag, I think it was Cut Ty Montgomery. And everybody, because for those of you who didn't watch the game, Ty Montgomery took the ball out, and he should have stayed back in the end zone. He could have taken a knee, given Rodgers some time. It wasn't a lot of time, but with Rodgers, no time is still enough time. That's kind of how a lot of people feel. And he went out of the end zone, fumbled it, and then the game was over. So apparently he was getting death threats, and everybody was pissed at Ty Montgomery. But for those of you who, if you are a Packer fan and you see that, you're blaming Ty Montgomery, you're looking at the wrong cause. You're looking at the wrong source of an issue, okay? I read this thing on PFT, which I thought about this before I read it, but then they came out with it, and I'm like, okay, so it's not only me. They were talking about how McCarthy is the reason that kind of stuff happens. That looks basically what I think the title said, Montgomery's mistake looks bad on McCarthy, basically. And I'm just going to read you a little something that I looked up before I came on the podcast. In 2006, Mike McCarthy's record was 8-8. In 2007, his record was 13-3. In 2008, he was 6-10. In 2009, he was 11-5. In 2010, he was 10-6. And that was the year they won the championship. They won the Super Bowl. In 2011, he was 15-1. 2012, 11-3. 13, 8-7-1. 14, 12-4. 15, 10-6. 16, 10-6. 17, 7-9. And as of currently, this will come out on Sunday, so they'll be playing a game. But right now, as of Wednesday when I record this, they're 3-3-1. Okay. Now, in 2013 and 17, Rodgers got hurt. He broke clavicle. I think he broke one on each side. He might have broke the same one twice. I don't really remember. I looked it up because I know he broke it last year, and then he came back, and they didn't win the game, and then he quit. And I've been saying this for years. Okay, Mike McCarthy is a joke. All right. If you go back, if you go on Pro Football Focus, which is a website that has a lot of football stats, and any of you who listen that are like football know probably that website. But if you look there, it has his entire coaching record. And what I remember when he got hired was he was an offensive guy. He came from the offensive side of the ball. And I looked it up, and he was an offensive coordinator for the Saints, and he was an offensive coordinator for the for the 49ers, which I didn't even realize that he was the offensive coordinator. I thought he was a running backs coach or, offensive quality control, some fucking bullshit thing. I know offensive quality control is really low down on the list, but I figured he was some assistant coach. I just didn't think he was the guy who ran the offense. And he was in the Saints for a long time, and then he had 1 year with the Niners and then came over to the Packers. But what we're seeing, and what we've seen since day one, is, okay, the game against the Rams is like, that's like the nexus point for this whole idea for me, because Sean McVay isn't a lot older than I am. His offense is 300 times more innovative than Mike McCarthy's. They played Kyle Shanahan the week before the bye, and his offense is 300 times better than Mike McCarthy. Okay? Now, Mike McCarthy's an older man, and he's been doing the same goddamn thing for the last decade. Okay? He's been here since 2006. I don't think he's updated his offense since then. Now, he's won one Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. One Super Bowl. Now, granted, there's a lot of things that go into that. I'm not going to say that he's solely at fault for Rodgers not winning more Super Bowls. But, I mean, for years, if you were in Wisconsin, everybody hated Dom Capers. Now, for those of you who aren't Packer fans, Dom Capers was the defensive coordinator up until this last year. And I think, first, there were a couple reasons why McCarthy kept him around as long as he did. The first one was, McCarthy was an offensive coordinator, and that was it, and then he was a head coach. They brought in Dom Capers. Dom Capers brought the Panthers into the league as their first head coach, and then he brought in the Texans as when they were an expansion team. I don't remember how long he lasted with either franchise, but he was a head coach before. He had, I want to say 8 years in total, because I think it was 3 and 5, something like that. It could be less, but still, he was a head coach before. McCarthy, I'm assuming, had a relationship with him. So he became McCarthy's defensive coordinator / mentor kind of deal, because when you're not a head coach before, I'm assuming it's a big fucking step up, and you got to kind of learn how to do that. So then he probably looked to Capers as like, okay, well, give me some advice. And the other reason he kept fucking Capers there is because Capers' defense was so mind-bogglingly stupid at certain points, especially later on, like since 2009, that people are like, what the fuck are we doing on defense? I don't know how many times I had conversations. My mom's ex-boyfriend, who passed away, used to complain about fucking Capers constantly. He bitched every time we watched football. Because he had coached football in high school, and he was a defensive coordinator, and he was more, he wasn't a 3-4 guy, and he did not like all the defensive backs. He hated that, and every game it was Capers' fault, no matter whether but if you watch the games, the defense had questionable calls, but the offense was just as bad. I mean, the offense is just as bad. And if you want to see that, I mean, you look in 2013, they went 8-7-1. Well, Rodgers broke his clavicle, or he broke his collarbone, whichever one you want to believe. Whichever one, I don't really know the difference. I know there are different bones in the shoulder, but who cares really? But honestly, Rodgers broke something. And then last year they went 7-9. Rodgers broke something again. So in 4 years since 2013, when he broke the same kind of bone in his body, they didn't develop a backup quarterback. This offensive guy who was an offensive coordinator for 6 years or so before he came over and became head coach, couldn't develop one fucking quarterback other than Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers is the offense. That's what we've proven with those 2 years. And Rodgers being hurt kills the team, because the offense stays on the field because of Rodgers. The defense stays off the field because of Rodgers. The defense in small spurts can do stuff. And, the defense played fairly well on Sunday last week when they played the Rams. I was surprised. Clay Matthews this year looks like he actually wants to play football. Shockingly, he's in a contract year. And I know people are going to, if you listen to this and you're a Clay Matthews fan, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I think Clay Matthews is overrated. I really do. Granted, he's had a lot of injury issues, but when he does play, he hasn't had that same drive. And granted, he had injuries. I'm not saying it's all that, but I never. He got that contract, and then he had injuries. He had this, and some of that stuff wasn't that. I mean, you saw Rodgers broke his collarbone last year, and he tried to come back and play. Now he played one game, and it didn't go well, and he shut her down because we'll get him next year, because that's the whole thing. But Matthews didn't really have that, and this isn't about Matthews. I'm getting off topic, but I don't like him. That's a different discussion for a different day. But the point is that we have Mike McCarthy as our coach, all right? And I was reading these comments because now they're playing the Patriots this week, and they're talking about how Brady said in the Patriots offense, Rodgers would throw for 7,000 yards. And Belichick's happy they only play him once every 4 years. And then Rodgers goes, well, for the greatest of all time comment, he's got 5 championships. I can't really say it. That kind of ends that there. If I'm Rodgers, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I am fucking livid. Now, he was mad at Ty Montgomery last week, but if he was smart about it, he would have went over and fucking kicked McCarthy in the nuts. He has wasted that guy's career. He's wasted it. Now, Thompson was involved, Capers was involved, all of those guys, but Thompson's absolute aversion to signing anybody outside of undrafted fucking free agents. Oh, we'll get him in here and McCarthy will coach him up. Well, he's kind of a dunce, so you're going to get guys, they did a good job of understanding who fit McCarthy's system to a degree, but they didn't do a good job of they added Jimmy Graham this year. He's helped. And he's not, like I said, he's old Jimmy Graham. He's not the Jimmy Graham of old, but he's done some things, right? They signed Jahvari Evans last year when Thompson, I think, was forced to sign people. And you can say whatever, but he was adequate at guard. They weren't prepared to replace Lang and Sitton in the last few years. I still think letting Sitton go, granted he was making money and he was hurt, but it's the same thing with Jordy. They didn't even really come to him with a good offer. They just lowballed the shit out of him, and they're like, yeah, we're going to give you dick money, and if you want to stay here for nothing, we'll keep you. But if you want to have anything commensurate with any kind of value that you've ever shown, we're not going to give you an opportunity to maybe get back to where you were. We're just going to throw you down, the proverbial financial rabbit hole, and you can fuck off. And I think that's kind of disrespectful. I don't, like I said, I've said this before, I think Jordy Nelson is an okay, even at times he was a good football player. I think now he's not the same player, and he's older, and with receivers as they get older, he's still decent, and he was Rodgers' number one guy. Those two gelled really well. So to keep him around, to keep the quarterback happy alone would have been a smart move. Now, did they want to pay him the money he was making? Absolutely not. And I don't blame him for that. But his offer was insulting. I think I read that somewhere, is that he was insulted by the offer that the Packers gave him. And, oops, I'm sorry about that. And if he's insulted, how bad is that offer? He's only been with one team his entire career. Now he chose to go with the Raiders, who are, I'm probably going to talk about them this week too, just because of what the fuck. But I look at the records, and they had good records. They look like they've done well, but what have they truly done? They are, as a team, when Rodgers plays, their records are the same as Peyton Manning with his play in the regular season, because everybody said Peyton Manning was a regular season quarterback, and he won 2 championships. The last one he won simply by being on that Broncos defense, which was really good, and he won the first one, more legitimately than he won the last, as far as his play was concerned. And the Packers are Peyton Manning. In the regular season, they can do really well, but come the postseason, they stink. They can't adjust to anybody. They don't do any... their offense is so stupidly simplistic. Aaron Jones is the best fucking running back we have, period. Aaron Jones is the best running back the Packers have. There is no question in my mind. And they run him... their stats I see all the time, with Aaron Jones, without Aaron Jones, how many yards per rush, all this shit. And he's a significantly, above average fucking football player, and they won't play him. Now, he's had some issues, but they aren't like he didn't go stab anybody. He's not fucking Aaron Hernandez, you know. So he got in a little trouble. Okay. But how long are we going to punish the guy? I mean, I think he had community service, or he had some kind of the penalty. He's had an adjudication for his offense. So let's move on. I mean, fucking Michael Kendricks, who plays for the Seahawks, pleaded guilty to insider, has said he insider traded, and he got 8 fucking games from the league. And the Browns cut him. The Seahawks are like, fuck, he's a good football player. Let's get him on here. We'll play him until they suspend him. Now they've suspended him, and he sits out and whatever. But you got this. I mean, it's just arbitrary bullshit that McCarthy's like, I don't like that. And then they don't run Williams that much either. Jamal Williams, who's the backup, and they run him more than they run Jones. But every time Jones is in there, he does it, and maybe his conditioning isn't as good. Maybe there's something there that I'm not privy to. But I see him play. He's a significant, offensive piece. I don't understand why we're not using him more. Why they're not using him more. Why the Packers don't run that guy. I don't know. I mean, like I said, there's something to be said for freshness and all this other stuff, and you got to rotate guys. I get all that. I get it all. But I said this before, Ty Montgomery should have been a receiver. He had no business being a running back. And these people who threatened the guy and were all mad at Montgomery, you guys are mad at the wrong fucking person, okay? Now, Gunkist is better than Thompson, we think. However, I'm not real happy with that guy because they traded fucking Clinton Dix for a 4th-round pick. Now, a 4th-round pick can turn into something. I'm not saying it can't, but it's a fringe player. Like, once you get down to the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds, these are fringe guys. They might make it, they might not. 4th's a little more towards the make it side than the not. Once you get to 5th, then you're getting real close. 6th, 7th, a lot of those guys don't make it. But you traded a 1st-round pick, still only 25 years old, and is rated with that Pro Football Focus, that website I referenced before. He's the 2nd rated fucking safety. The first one is DJ Swearinger, who already plays for the fucking Redskins. So they have the top 2 rated safeties. The dude is good. That was the one pick of McCarthy's, or Thompson's. I hated Thompson's drafts. I hated him. He never drafted anybody I liked, ever. Clinton Dix was one guy that he drafted that I liked a lot. And he filled a need. He was a guy that they needed. It was a situation where he was the best player available, all that kind of stuff. Like, it all fell into place, and they picked him, and I was like, holy fuck. They picked a guy I actually like. I'm shocked because they never do that. Through Thompson's tenure, I'm a draft guy. I like to draft. Like, if I'm still doing this podcast around draft time, as far as a Packer fan goes, you'll probably get some good information here, because I can predict who's going to do well, whether the Packers pick him or not. And granted, you're like, oh, you look at there's some guys in the later rounds. Like, I'll give you a guy I was way wrong on, Aaron Curry. Aaron Curry was a linebacker out of, I think that was Wake Forest years ago. And he went 3rd overall maybe not 3rd. I don't know. He went high to the Seahawks. I loved that guy. He had sideline to sideline. He did everything. Leader, checked all of the boxes as a linebacker. But he had some knee problems, which I didn't know about. And he just, the knee problem sapped him of his speed, and that was it. He was done. And he kind of went away, which was sad because watching him in college, he was damn good football player. God damn, was he a good football player. But there's those guys, they're good in college. They give it all they got on the college field, and then they do whatever they can to be the highest they can be picked. They do that one contract, they get the guarantee, and that's it, and they're done. Because they know, I was watching the movie The Gambler this week, and it's a Mark Wahlberg movie, and he's a college professor, and he's got a basketball player who's like, well, everybody's telling me I should stay here, but I already got a fucking knee, and you failed to think about those things, and that was quite a while ago with Aaron Curry, and I was younger then, and that was one of those things that I really wasn't considering the human element, I get better as I get older, but the point being is that Gunkist trades Clinton Dix for a 4th-round fucking pick, okay? Now, Josh Jones plays mostly special teams. The 2 guys that are playing at safety, Kentrell Bryce and I think it's Whitehead. I've never heard of either one. I've heard of those guys. Like, I know they're around, but before they came to be a Packer, I had never heard of them. And I've heard of a lot of people, but never heard of those two guys. Josh Jones, I know because he was drafted. He was a fairly decently rated safety in that draft, but I think he's been injured, and I'm assuming he's in the coach's doghouse. If he's like, I think he was like a third round pick, and he's playing fucking special teams with undrafted guys starting. I don't know, but the point being is Gunkiss might be better than Thompson, so he might give McCarthy pieces that Thompson didn't give him. But all we're going to see, and I can almost guarantee this, is a more precipitous decline because you're going to get what you need, right? Supposedly. As fans, we're going to see them get, Muhammad Wilkerson, Jimmy Graham, the guys that they got this offseason, and they're going to bring in free agents, hopefully a receiver, definitely a pass rusher. I'd love to see him sign some offensive linemen. I know it ain't sexy, but fucking Christ, they could use a guard or, a tackle. I don't care if he's left or right. And then, because I think Bulaga, getting rid of him wouldn't be a bad idea because he keeps getting injured. He's not a bad football player, but he keeps getting injured. So to either get a right tackle and get rid of Bulaga that way, or I'm not exactly sold on Bakhtiari this season as a left tackle. So to get him as a left tackle, to get a left tackle and then shift Bakhtiari over to right, but that's not as easy as you think because they were talking about Sitton when he went down to the Dolphins and he was changing position, and I read this thing about how Sitton said to him, well, how hard is it to change, which side you're the guard on, left or right, and he said, well, it's like wiping your ass with your other hand. And graphic as that may be, that fucking stuck in my mind. I'm like, God damn, that must be difficult as, all hell, because I couldn't even imagine that. So he kind of crystallized that in my mind. So there's things that could be done to make the team better, but then they're going to get all of these pieces. There's going to be excitement. We as fans are going to say, okay, we got it now, man. There's no excuses. And barring Rodgers getting hurt, there's not going to be any fucking excuses, and that fat son of a bitch is going to screw it up, and what are we going to do as fans? Are we going to... Thompson's not there. Capers isn't there. Are we finally going to put the fucking proverbial bullseye on the guy that deserves it and say, he is the reason. He is the reason that this team stinks. His offense is simplistic. His offense is stupid. His offense is... Yeah, I mean, Rodgers is asking to open up the offense more. How in the fuck is your offense that inept, and then you have to hire a new defensive coordinator, and you need a new offensive coordinator too? You fire the old offensive coordinator, who I think last year was Edgar Bennett. You fire him, and you bring back Joe Philbin, who was the offensive coordinator before. And I hate to tell you, but his offenses weren't that innovative. You saw his time with the Dolphins. It wasn't like he was, reinventing the fucking wheel. And granted, now everybody's chasing McVay and Shanahan guys and all this bullshit. And I mean, they could have gotten rid of that frickin' dickweed and gotten Kyle Shanahan. I mean, see, did you watch that game with the 49ers? You watched their offense. Think about what Kyle Shanahan could do. Now, he had Jimmy Garoppolo before. You saw what Jimmy Garoppolo did. You see what C.J. Beathard's capable of in that offense. It's not that C.J. Beathard's that great of a quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is much better than he is, and you saw what their offense was with a much better quarterback than C.J. Beathard, but C.J. Beathard looks fairly competent as a starting quarterback. When I guarantee you brought him into McCarthy's offense, he'd look like Deshaun Kaiser or Brett Hundley or fucking anybody else that they brought in. Yeah, they had Matt Flynn that one year, and he did that one game where he blew everybody's socks off, and then they signed him. Well, he went up there and he stunk because he's not that good. And they're like, oh, it's the offense. At that time, it was a different offense. The offense now, the line isn't nearly as good. The receivers, I mean, Cobb's maybe a 3 at this point, a third receiver. I can't. Him being a second receiver is kind of sad. I like Devontae, but in a really good offense, Devontae's probably the second receiver. He's not a true number one. Now, maybe in a couple years, he'll make me eat my words. He'll be better than, who's the best guy right now? I want to say Julio Jones, but he can't score any touchdowns. All I'm thinking is guys like AJ Green, but he's having a down year. Stephon Diggs is Thielen. There you go. Maybe he'll be better than Adam Thielen because that guy is amazing. I mean, that game the other night with the Saints, Michael Thomas. Maybe he'll be better than Michael Thomas. Those are two guys that played against each other, and they're both pretty goddamn good. And maybe he'll be a number one. Maybe he'll get this. But right now, I mean, he plays really well, and he's really good in the offense, and Rodgers trusts him. And there must have been something there because they drafted him in the third round that year, and I hated that guy. I hated him because, like I said, I've said this before, he reminded me of Bill Schrader. He dropped the ball all the time. He came from Fresno State. I just thought he was one of those guys that came from a school. I think he played with Derek Carr, too. And I was like, well, he was with Derek Carr, and Derek Carr's like talked to be a first-round fucking quarterback, so of course he's going to look better. But I think they kind of helped each other, So he's turned into a much better receiver than I thought. I was kind of wrong about that. I not at first. At first it looked terrible, and I was like, see, I'm right. But he's turned it around. I'll give him credit for that. And he might even get better. And because I read this, I was walking in the store today, and there was a magazine that said, Devontae Adams, I'm only getting started, and maybe that's possible. Maybe he's just getting started, and he's going to be an all-pro, one of the best all time, and I'm going to look like an idiot. And that's possible. And I'll be the first to say, hey, man, I fucked that one up. I fucked it up in the draft, so he can prove me wrong. I'm more than willing. I hope he does. I honestly do. But as it sits right now, he's probably like a number two, a really good number two. Don't get me wrong, but a number two nonetheless. And they don't have a number one receiver. Their tight end, the best one they've had is Jared Cook. He's now with the Raiders and actually doing well. I mean, the Packers cast-offs go, and they often do okay. Nelson had that pretty big game. Jared Cook's done okay. I bet Ty Montgomery does something with the Ravens. But getting back to, Cobb is probably a third. Geronimo's okay, but he's not very well developed, and I think, in a couple of years he might be something like a third receiver or maybe even a second, but he's not a number one, he's not a number two, he's not a number three, he's probably a number four on a good offense. And the young guys are looking better. That St. Brown, that Equanimous St. Brown, I don't know how to say his first name because it's different than what I'm used to. But that guy, oh damn, I like him. I liked him at Notre Dame for his size and his measurables. He's had some great plays. I don't think Rodgers really trusts him yet. He likes that Scantling guy more. But I like to see him do stuff because I really think he's got the potential to be a really good receiver with the size and the speed combination that he has. Whether or not he can put it all together, I don't know. Because I know he's got a brother too, and I think the brother plays for USC, and he's supposed to be pretty good too. But I know he's got a brother. I'm not exactly sure where he plays, and I don't know what his first name is either. But it's something different, like his like Equanimous, and I don't know. I'm so tired of every time the Packers lose or every time something happens, everybody's up in arms about the team, and they never mention fucking McCarthy once. Now it's getting worse because all of the excuses are gone. Thompson's gone, Capers is gone. He's got a new defensive coordinator. He's got a new / old offensive coordinator. There's a new general manager. They had free agent signings. They had a fairly successful draft because Jerry Alexander's looked okay. Josh Jackson's looked okay. They had some Kevin King from the year before looks okay. I mean, they have some guys. They have some talent in the pipeline, and they're not really doing anything. And at this point, everybody... And when I say everybody, I'm talking like national media and the local media and the sports pundits, as they are finally catching on. Hey, maybe this coach is the problem. But I had a really big back and forth on Twitter tonight. There was a tweet by Adam Schefter, and that's what it was. He was claiming how the Packers weren't ready to surrender the season even though they traded Clinton Dix and Ty Montgomery. And I commented on how they surrendered the season the minute they walked in with fucking McCarthy as the head coach because he should have been gone last year, period. They should have just started over, they hired a new general manager. You let the general manager hire his coach. I mean, look what happened with the Browns. John Dorsey came in. John Dorsey can draft. John Dorsey can turn around a franchise. I would have liked to seen the Packers bring John Dorsey in. He's kind of an asshole as far as I understand, but he used to be in Green Bay, and he obviously can pick players. I mean, Baker Mayfield looks like a decent pick. Denzel Ward looks like a good pick. Antonio Callaway looks like a good pick. He signed some decent guys. There's talent there, and he can evaluate talent, but he couldn't get rid of Hugh Jackson. And then they brought in Todd Haley, and then those two idiots fought each other. And they finally got rid of both of them. And now Greg Williams is the head coach, who is like the biggest idiot I've ever heard in my whole life. I have little to no respect for that guy. I think he would be better suited to shut the hell up and just like be quiet during interviews. It was a bad day for interviews for head coaches today. They had Greg Williams was out there, and he was criticized. Myles Garrett criticized the defensive calls, and then he's like, "Well, if you can't if you can't stand on your own, it's fine to criticize me. I don't really care. Guys who can't stand up, and take criticism, criticize other people." I'm like, that's the best fucking defensive player you got. I would not piss him off. I mean, especially if he wants. And then he's saying how, there were a bunch of I had 11. I think he said 11 head coaching offers. 4 he didn't even have to show up. They just sent him the contract, but he didn't take it. It's like, I don't believe that, because you are an idiot and you would probably do that, And then Matt Patricia, who's the coach of the Lions, got on some reporter because a reporter asked him a question. He's like, "Yeah, you shouldn't slouch. Why don't you sit up? Have a little respect for the process. Like, you're always here. Like, just give me this." And he asked him a question about Golden Tate, and he got mad about it. It's like, fuck you, dude. I mean, if you look at that fat fucker, he's gained like 100 pounds since he took over. He looks like Charlie Weiss now. I think they hired Charlie Weiss. He just wore a Matt Patricia costume because he didn't get enough money from Notre Dame and Kansas. The guy's not very good, and his defense isn't very good, and he's this defensive guru, supposedly. And his team, who's not that far out of first place, trades arguably one of their best offensive weapons. And I got yelled at on Twitter because there's this Kenny Galladay who's not bad. They got that Karan Johnson from Auburn who's pretty good. He's on my fantasy team, But Marvin Jones isn't that good. Golden Tate's probably one of your better players, and you got rid of him? Okay. They haven't had, Ziggy Ansah's off and on off. He's just off most of the time because he's injured. And their defense as a whole ain't that great. But I don't know. It was not a good day for head coaches, and it wasn't a good day for. It's not a good day to be McCarthy in my land, because I don't want anything to do with him. I think he's a sad excuse for a head coach, and I've thought this for years. I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers. Aaron fucking Rodgers. I guarantee you, if I were to say to the rest of the league, "Do you want Aaron Rodgers?" they would say yes. Like Kansas City with Mahomes probably wouldn't. The Patriots might, because Belichick wanted to is done with Brady. Brady's significantly older than Rodgers, so he'd probably win like another fucking 5 championships with Rodgers. But that could be a possibility where they wouldn't do it. The Chargers might, because Rivers is older. But, that might be a question, because he's a damn good quarterback. The Saints, probably not, but maybe, because Breeze is older. But, they might not, because he's still pretty goddamn good. He didn't show up real well last week, but, he's still pretty goddamn good. I'm trying to think. Guys like the Texans with Watson, probably not, because he's a younger guy, but maybe. I don't know. They took a swing on Osweiler the year before they got Watson. Probably not now, because Watson, is significantly younger, but a lot of people think he's going to get fucked up because he runs for contact and he takes contact. But most of the other teams, there's very few. Maybe the Seahawks with Russell Wilson. Maybe the Panthers wouldn't do it. The Bears would do it, because Trubisky's real sketchy and Rodgers is Rodgers. The Vikings would probably do a straight-up swap for Cousins, because Cousins is good, but Rodgers is an upgrade. Matt Stafford, again, younger, but Rodgers is an upgrade. That's just in division. I don't know. You might be a fan of the other team. And you're like, you're fucking full of shit. Maybe. Maybe I'm clouded because I like Rodgers. Maybe I'm clouded because in that draft I said Rodgers should have went first overall. And when he didn't, and he went to the Packers, I was like, that was the best fucking pick we've ever had as a franchise. Ever. But I don't know. I sit here and I look at how many years that fat idiot has coached the team and how many Super Bowls they've won. And granted, in the initial portion, Favre was doing his bullshit right away, and then, Rodgers, when he took over, it was better, and he was more successful, and he just was a team guy. I would be pissed if I was Rodgers. A prodigious talent. I mean, you can't argue that he is a really good football player. You look at the fucking team, you know. They don't finish under fucking 10-6 unless he's hurt. Unless he's fucking hurt. So they win more games than they lose because of Rodgers. That's how I feel about it. It has nothing to do with McCarthy. Now, granted, the defense plays better when everything revolves around the quarterback. A lot of people say that. They say the quarterbacks get too much blame and too much credit. But I think in this case, Rodgers doesn't get enough credit. And I think in this case also, because they say that about head coaches too, is that they get too much credit and too much blame. But I don't think he's getting any blame. And he doesn't get a lot of credit either. But he shouldn't get any credit, and he should get all of the blame. Because Dom Capers was his fault. That's your defensive coordinator. You're not doing your job on defense. It's his job to correct it. Ty Montgomery didn't know what he was doing. It's his job to make sure fucking Ty Montgomery knows what he's doing in critical fucking situations of the game. You can blame Ty Montgomery, but that dude was a kickoff returner in college. He's been doing it for a lot of fucking years. And he wanted to make a play. He was frustrated. He had no fucking role in the offense because McCarthy is a dumbass. That guy he was a contributor for the first couple years in the league. And then they moved him to running back, and he did nothing. And then they have two significant, because Montgomery was the running back when they had no running backs. Then they got two significantly better than him running backs. One significantly better than the other, Aaron Jones, who they don't play as much as they should. And I've covered that already. But Montgomery, who is by far the worst running back of that three, they should have just put him back at receiver. Why not? Come out of the slot. Tell him at the end of last year when you had Jones, when you had Williams, but they had to make sure they kept him because, Jones had that trouble, so they weren't sure. And then Jones came back, and Jones has played really well. And now it's like, okay, well, now we really don't need you. Well, he's got to change his body because he's got to be a little, he's got to be smaller. He can't be as bulked up as he is. He's got to lose some of that muscle. That's my guess. That's just my guess based on physiology. Because you saw him. He used to be he's a smaller guy, and he used to be thinner. And then when he played running back, the fucking dude got he's gigantic. The fuck was that? He's gigantic. And I'm not interested in hearing about how individual players are failing right now, because until you hold the head coach accountable, shut up. Just shut up. Anybody who wants to bitch about the players, like I bitch about Matthews, that's because of his contract. That has nothing to do with anything else. It has to do with the fact he got the money and he hasn't really performed up to his contract. And now he's performing, and look what's on the horizon, a new contract. I hope he goes to some stupid team that gives him like prodigious money, and then he doesn't do anything. Like, go to the fucking Rams. I hope the Rams lose, because they traded for Dante Fowler, and some guy on Twitter is telling me how, we just need a guy to set the edge. That guy can't set a fucking tee set, much less the edge. He stinks. He's not a pass rusher. Everybody, last year he got 2 sacks in the playoffs, and everybody's like, he's a good football player. He stinks. Robert Quinn was more expensive, but they traded away Robert Quinn for a 4th and a swap of 6, and they traded for Dante Fowler for a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick. So they traded more draft capital away for a worse player, if you ask me. Granted, he's like, the cap doesn't work. Learn the cap rules. Okay, well, you know what? Learn how fucking football works, because setting the edge, do you really think that because Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald are there, somehow he's going to be unleashed? let me put it to you this way. The guy was drafted, I think, third. So he's supposed to be a fairly good talent. And granted, and now he blew out his knee his first year. But if you don't think that takes something away from players, you're nuts. And on the Jaguars defense, where the defense as a whole is a monster, because you look at the Rams defense and their linebackers are fairly pedestrian. I mean, Alec Ogletree was the best guy that they had, and everybody said he was overrated, and they traded him to the Giants. But their linebackers are kind of unknown. They had Connor Barwin, who they let go, and he's, I think, with the Giants. And I said at the trade deadline, they want somebody to set the edge. Connor Barwin, they got him for cheap at the Giants. Bring him back. You could have got him for like a 6th round, that swap of 6th round picks with the fucking Dolphins that you got for Quinn. You could have traded him for that for a lot less money than, a possible Fowler. And then he's a free agent, at the end of the year. So you sent a 3rd and a 5th round for an 8-game rental, ostensibly an 8-game rental. They're fucking stupid. Anybody who thinks that Dante Fowler is anything, like I saw they talked about like the winners and losers of the trade deadline, and Dante Fowler was a winner because he went from the Jaguars, who are desperately falling apart. I had some guy on Twitter tell me, because I tweeted about how the Jaguars, they had that incident before the game in London where they, for those of you who don't know, where they had 4 players who got in trouble at a bar because they had a miscommunication, they said, about the alcohol, and it was like a $64,000 bill, and they thought they were getting it for free, and they got held up and whatever. So I said, Jesus Christ, that ship is sinking bad. This is sad when you think the team was going to be a Super Bowl contender. And I had some guy, Jags by 20. Well, if you mean they gave up 24 points to the Eagles and lost, yeah, I mean, that's true. They aren't going to fucking beat the Eagles. The Eagles stink, but they're not, they're not as good as they were last year. But the Jaguars, they got Blake Bortles at quarterback. What else do I have to say? And, okay, we're taking out Blake Bortles. We're putting in Cody Kessler. Eesh. And now they signed Landry Jones, which is like, I don't care about Colin Kaepernick, but you can't tell me that he's not better than Blake Bortles, Cody Kessler, or Landry Jones. Maybe at this point, because he's been out of the league for a long time. But he's certainly worth a look in comparison to those 3 numbnuts. But I'm not, and they trade for Carlos Hyde. They do all this shit. And they trade for Carlos Hyde, and they trade away Dante Fowler, who was fighting with that Yannick Ngakoue or whatever that guy's name is on the team before. I don't like Dante Fowler in the first place. And then they trade for him, and I got some guy. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why didn't, and the guy's got to say something to me. We just need somebody to set the edge. Yeah, well, watch him do nothing for the rest of the year. And then if you guys don't fucking win the Super Bowl this year, how you're going to be in cap hell and have no draft picks for the next 2 to 3 years, because it's going to take you that long to recover from that. Because, you signed Donald to all that money, you signed Cooks to all that money, you got, Sue locked up for a year, but that's about it. And you got Talib and Marcus Peters and all these guys, but it's pretty much this year. And once those guys are gone, that's pretty much all she wrote. And to think that they're going to trade for that guy and he's going to do anything but, just take up a spot on the fucking team. But, it is what it is. You got fans who are homers, because I'm not a homer. I hate what the fucking Packers are doing with McCarthy. I hate that guy. I hate him. I like Rodgers. I like the team, but it's just like life and family and everything else. I'm brutally honest about it, and they fucking suck because of McCarthy. They should have won that game if they had a better coach. That's how I feel about it. You can say it's Montgomery's fault. You can say it's a myriad of instances where things could have been different, but that fucking idiot that they have as the coach is the reason. That offense is the reason that they're not as good as they should be. And whenever Aaron Rodgers goes down, the whole team goes to shit, because they have no backup quarterback and they have no offensive ingenuity. Look at what happened to the 49ers. They have lost Jimmy Garoppolo and they put in CJ Beathard, and they're not terrible. They almost beat the fucking Packers. Almost. Did he make a crucial mistake? Sure. But he's not a fucking starting quarterback. But he looks like a serviceable quarterback. Brett Hundley doesn't look like that. Deshaun Kaiser never looked like that. Joe Callahan didn't look like that. I mean, you want me to go through the list? That fucking Taysom Hill that came out of BYU, who plays for the Saints and runs around on the field and everybody thinks he's amazing. That guy looked closer to something than anybody else the Packers have had for more than 10 minutes. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I belabored the point enough. But if you're a Packer fan and you have any problem with the team, look at the fucking head coach. It stinks from the head down. Fishes stink from the head down. There's nobody else left. Since 06, the only guy left is this fucking asshole and Mark Murphy. And there was somebody on Twitter said, well, they were more interested in building a brand, and it's sad. I don't know if that's the case. It's possible. It's entirely possible because they had to keep the name out there. And that's why they were 10-6, 10-6, 11-5, 15-1, all that shit. But they weren't winning Super Bowls. They weren't fucking winning Super Bowls. And with Aaron Rodgers, goddammit, you should be in the conference championship game every fucking year. And I don't care if that's an unreasonable expectation. If you have a decent head coach and a competent head coach and general manager combination, you should be in the playoffs and, going towards the Super Bowl almost every year, unless you suffer a devastating injury like they did last year and sort of did this year and in 2013. Those are acceptable. Rodgers goes down. This year with the Niners, you wouldn't expect anything because they lost their star quarterback. They're still doing okay. They're fighting. They're battling. You saw what happened with the Packers last year. They didn't fight or battle at all because they had Brett Hundley, and everybody in town is like, oh, Brett Hundley fucking stinks. Brett Hundley stinks because Mike McCarthy can't develop a wet fucking paper bag. I hate the guy. I hate the guy, and I want him fired. They surrendered the season the minute they walked in with him, and they should have traded him. I said they should trade him to fucking Siberia. Get rid of him. Like an old Hogan Heroes reference, which is an old show from, I don't know when, the 1960s or something like that, with Bob Crane, where they used to say they were going to send the guys to the Western Front. And it was a reference to Germany fighting in the Western Front in World War II and how it was just terrible with the Russians. That's where they should send fucking McCarthy, is to a Western Front. If I have any older listeners, you'll get the reference. If I have younger listeners, look up Hogan's Heroes and try to watch some episodes. It's actually not a bad show. Oh, I hate McCarthy. Anyway, so we'll move on to the UFC Fight Night 138. I think that's what it was. And I want to start with Ed Herman. Ed Herman liked my comment on Twitter, and I like Ed Herman. I always have. I did not realize he was 38 years old. Thought he was a little younger than that, but I've always liked his fighting style. I've always liked the way that he's gone about his business, and he kind of got screwed. He thought he won, and he fought Jean Villante, who's the guy who trains with Chris Weidman, and he's actually he apparently won like the light heavyweight and the heavyweight belt in a different organization, and he's a pretty good fighter. He has good fights. He's not like, he doesn't win all the time, but he's always exciting. His fights are pretty good to watch, and he even thought that, I think he thought Herman won. So too bad for Ed Herman. I wish he would have won the fight because he hasn't fought a lot. I think he's fought 3 times since 2016. So he probably could use a win. Then Sirkunov, that's what he said. Misha Sirkunov fought Patrick Cummings. That was another light heavyweight fight. I don't know that guy at all. I don't hear anything about him. I don't know when he fights. I just see some of his fights. That guy's really good. Now, granted, Patrick Cummings isn't that great of a fighter. I know he fought Daniel Cormier that one time, and there was a lot of hype behind him because he was a big wrestler. I think he comes from Penn State as a wrestler, and they were talking about that during the fight, but he's just not a very good fighter. He looks decent. Now he's growing that stupid mustache. I don't think he had that initially, but now or maybe he did. I don't know. He's got the mustache, and he apparently does it for mustache purposes. I don't fucking know what it does for your fighting ability, but I guess it's identifying. And he gets in there. I'm not like denigrating him as like the fact that he fights. I'm just saying I don't think he's as good as he was like kind of sold to be when he fought Daniel Cormier. So I think the expectations for him were really high. I think he was like a barista or something still when he fought Daniel Cormier, and he stepped in last minute. I mean, balls on him to do that. But I think he's gotten better, but that Sirkunov guy is fucking. He reminds me of like if like the Russian secret agents in the movie that just come and kill people, and they don't say anything, they don't look any kind of way, they just show up and then you're dead. And he's a hulking fucking giant dude. I mean, he's good. I think his record's like 14-4. I think if they put him against like some name guys, Patrick Cumming is sort of a name, but like higher name guys than that, like I don't know, Manawa or if Gustafson, Jones, whoever loses that one, if he were to go up against that, because it would look like an easy fight. Oven St. Peru too, that would be a fight for him. I don't know if they fought before. Now that I say that, I don't know, but I think that Sirkunov guy. I mean, like I said, you want to cast an assassin, a Russian assassin in a fucking movie, you'd cast that guy. He'd have no lines. He'd just show up and fuck people up like that. He's just intimidating as fuck to look at. And then Michael Johnson fought Artem Lobov, and I was really impressed with Lobov if he actually does what he said he was going to do. Michael Johnson stepped in like 7 days notice or something. It was real short notice. And he stepped in and fought at 145. And Michael Johnson made his name at 155. He's gone down to 145 because he kind of topped out at 155, I think. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. And he wanted some advantage, so he went down to 145. And he fought Lobov there, and he missed weight. Not by a lot, but by a little bit. And according to the commission rules, I think they were in Canada, he had to surrender 20% of his purse. And Lobov said that he was going to give it back to him because he was glad that he took the fight. And I thought, to me, it seemed like a stand-up thing to do. I mean, if he honestly gives him his money back and he's like, nah, man, it's good. You came and you fought, and you tried to fucking make weight, and you didn't miss it by that much, so we're good. I think that's a stand-up thing to do. That Lobov guy, Michael Johnson's probably better than he is. And even on a short notice fight, he's still better than he is. And Lobov, he fights. I'll give him credit for that. He goes in there, he keeps his fucking hands down, he gets punched in the face. He didn't get knocked out, but he gets punched constantly. If that guy doesn't have brain damage by the time he's 60, I'll be surprised, like dementia, because he's constantly getting hit. He don't go down though. But he's lost a lot of fights, and I saw this big thing. There was a blow up about him and McGregor being friends, and then John Kavanaugh came out and defended him and all this other stuff. I don't think he's as bad of a fighter as what was portrayed, but I do think that guys like him don't stay around that long if they lose as much as he does, unless there's something else there. Now, it doesn't always have to be you're friends with Conor McGregor. It could be, you're from a country that they need draw, That could be that you're a name from another organization, who brings over a large segment of a fan base. If you monetarily bring them something, they're probably going to keep you around, even if you lose, And I just there was that dust up, and I don't see the need for it, because it kind of is like, well, he lost, who cares, I mean, Lobov's not really a contender for anything, and Michael Johnson, he's better than he is. Even on a short notice fight, he's still better than he is, at least if you ask me. The headline of the night, though, was Anthony Smith. I have no idea who the fuck Anthony Smith was before the beginning of this year. I mean, I don't even remember seeing him fight. I saw him fight when he lost to Thiago Santos at 185. Now watching him fight at light heavyweight, I have no fucking idea how that guy made 185. But he's a really, like, he's a good, I mean, he's an enjoyable fighter to watch. Every fight I've seen of his, I enjoyed it. Now, Ozdemir was probably the most challenging opponent he's had at light heavyweight. That's how I'll say that. And he didn't, just destroy him like he had done his previous opponents. He did submit him, and he did win. But, I mean, I like Anthony Smith. Don't get me wrong. He called for a title shot. my problem with that is, first of all, he hasn't been a light heavyweight that long. Now, granted, he's got momentum behind him. I mean, he's got 3 fights, 2 against former title challengers. And when they said that, I was like, well, I know he fought Shogun Rua, but who the fuck was, or title holders, who the fuck was the other guy? And I think that was Rashad that he fought the first time. And he fought Ozdemir, who challenged DC, and he lost to DC pretty soundly. But I like Anthony Smith. I think new blood in the division, good idea. However, a couple of things struck me a little funny. First of all, at the end of the fight, he submitted Ozdemir, and he laid on the canvas. He was just exhausted. Now, this was a main event, so it was a 5-round fight. He really hadn't had a lot of 5-round fights, as far as that I know of. He may have, and I don't know about it, because, like I said to you, up till the beginning of this year, I had no fucking clue who Anthony Smith was. But he hasn't had a lot of 5-round fights. He hasn't had a lot of light heavyweight fights. And I think it feels like it's just real. It's not real premature, but it's just a little bit premature to put him in a title shot. I'd like to see him fight for the title, absolutely. I'd prefer to see him fight Gus than John Jones, because I think John Jones is just going to take him down, and it's going to be a stupid, boring fight where John Jones just keeps trying to take him down because, they asked John Jones, oh, what do you think, somebody on Twitter, what do you think about Anthony Smith's fight? Oh, I'm not that impressed. Well, you know what? I'm not that impressed that you can't stay unfucking suspended and, not be an asshole. I don't want to get started on John Jones because that's not really, that fucking trail's been covered, but I'm going to say this right now. I love John Jones when he started out. I listened to Joe Rogan's podcast with Ari Shaffir on the MMA Hour when they talked about when he told him to go to Jackson Winklejohn, and he was like, you got to get with a real camp, man. I loved him when he was not with a real camp. I used to take him in UFC. I used to beat my friends with him because he was long, he was lanky. I knew he could do some things, and like his avatar. Now, granted, this isn't him, but his avatar was, I liked his style, and I knew how to use it as the computer generated model of him, and so I followed his career, and I really liked him until he got popular. I remember when he went on Jay Leno's show with the fucking belt, and that was the end of it. He has been an insufferable prick since then. And troublemaker, causes trouble, gets in trouble. I don't think he's a bad person. I'm not judging him. It's the fight game. Not everybody's up, these aren't choir boys. I get it. But to ask John Jones about Anthony Smith's performance when he's not even the light heavyweight champion yet. He's been suspended for a significant period of time. Now, granted, then there was something on MMA Fighting last week or the week before about how the amount of steroids they found in him was like a drop of salt in the ocean or some fucking thing, or in a pool or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was like a small amount of something in a big body of water. And it's like, I don't fucking care how much they found. It's the fact that they found it. Again. You lunkhead. He puts himself in bad positions. He does things that, if it was a supplement that was tainted, I can't necessarily blame him. But at a certain point, you got to stop. You got to be more careful. And you can't guard against everything. Like the Brazilian guys down in Brazil that were getting, Brazilian guys that are down in Brazil. Well, there's a lot of Brazilian guys that moved to the United States, so I guess that's not as stupid as it sounds. But the guys who were taking the like Juniors Dos Santos and stuff like that, who were, steroid abusers supposedly, but it was just a lot of tainted supplements because their regulations aren't that tough. And they were talking about how, it's fucked them up. I get that. I get that. But there's a situation. The situation comes where John Jones is now somehow the presumed light heavyweight champion. I hope Gustafsson beats him. I really do. I really do. Because I'm not like, I like Gus. I like Alexander Gustafsson. I think some of the choices he makes are odd, but I like him. He's a good fighter. And I hope he beats John Jones. I really do, because I'd like to see John Jones go away from title contention for a couple of fights and just have to fight lower level people and kind of have to be humbled a little bit. I think it'd be good for him. I really do. But my thought process is that in between the time John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson supposedly fight for the title, I would like to see Anthony Smith fight one more time at light heavyweight. My ultimate opponent for him, because I looked at the rankings, 2 was Ozdemir. Ir Latifi and Jan Blachowicz are the guys that are up there, and 3 and 4. I'm not enamored with any of those people. He just beat Ozdemir, and Latifi, I think, has been hurt, and Blachowicz, those are guys you don't hear about. Until I looked it up, I didn't realize they were that high in the rankings. I had no idea. I haven't heard about them in a year, maybe. I don't even remember. I see stuff about him. I know Latifi was angling for a fight. I think it was with Yoel Romero, if I remember correctly, 205, but I don't remember that exactly. I know the rankings don't mean shit, but to me, if we're going to look at these rankings and try to sell a fight, I'd like to see him fight Jimmy Manuwa, who's 5th. Now think about that as a fight. Anthony Smith's a banger. He likes to go in there and throw hands. Jimmy Manuwa likes to fucking throw hands too. And if that fucker can stay healthy, now that is a question mark because he gets hurt a lot. But if he can stay healthy, that would be a good fight. Do another 5-round fight, main event, top of the card, have those 2 fight. And I think on 2 fronts, you get more excitement for Anthony Smith because if he goes against Jimmy Manuwa and knocks him out, that's more of because Rashad and Shogun are kind of, Rashad retired and Shogun should retire. Even though he was close to heavyweight, he was close to title contention because Daniel Cormier wanted to fight him because it was an easy fight, and he's a name. But I'd like to see him fight Jimmy Manuwa because he is a younger-ish, because I think he's in his mid-30s. I mean, he's not a young man, but he's a younger-ish guy who doesn't have a lot of fights. Has an exciting fighting style, has a name. And, people like to watch Jimmy Manuwa fight. I don't, Ir Latifi, they like watching him fight, but nobody really knows who he is. And that Jan guy, I watched him fight one time and it was terrible, so I don't really want to watch him fight anymore. He might have been an off night, but I would rather see him fight. He could fight Serkinov too, but he's a lot lower, so that wouldn't really do anything for his credibility. But I think Jimmy Manuwa would be a good fight, and then they do another 5-round fight so he can get trained for 5-round fights. He can train for another 5-round fight. So then the 3rd fight he has in light heavyweight at a 5-round fight is for the championship. Because if it wasn't just because he collapsed and all that other shit, and that might be just emotion. He might have been emotional and, the emotions of the moment and all that bullshit, people suffer from that. And I get that, and it might have been a situation like that where he was just really emotional and it all came out of him and he couldn't get off the canvas. To me, it looked like he was fucking exhausted. That was a long time. He had to do a lot of work, he wasn't used to it, whatever. And I think another 5-round fight, train for another 5-round fight. So then because if your second 5-round fight is for a championship, I think that's putting him at a disadvantage. And I'd like to see them build him properly. They haven't been doing that lately. They have a star problem. I keep hearing about how the UFC has a star problem. Well, the reason they have a star problem is it's their own doing because they just rubber stamp these guys. He's got 3 fights. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, now we're going to do it. Bam. And then they run him into the fight. They don't think, well, if we want to prolong him, if we want to do this. Because then he loses if he fights John Jones and he loses, convincingly, John Jones wipes the fucking floor with him because after the 2nd round he's exhausted. What good does that do you? Now you wrecked the guy. He has no name anymore, and the amount of credibility he's gonna have to earn back to fucking get to a point where he's sellable, even as a main event guy on fight nights is. Which they're not going to have anymore, except on ESPN Plus. I'm not going to talk about that, but he's not going to be sellable. So what they should do is set him up so at least he can have a fight. Look at what they did with Gustafsson. He wasn't much of a fighter, like a name, before he fought that fucking fight with John Jones. Now everybody loves the guy because it was a fucking war, and that's what people want to see. They want to see wars. Well, let's prepare Anthony Smith for war. Let's put him in against Jimmy Manuwa. If he trains for a 5-round fight and it only goes 2 rounds, well, at least he trained for a 5-round fight and he knows what that's like. And he can even say in the post-interview, if he's like, yeah, man, I was fresh. I was ready to go 12 rounds. Let's fucking go. Let's keep this up. Bring me another guy. Fuck it. That kind of deal. I think that way they could build him and they could have him longer term as a name instead of, oh, well, he's had 3 fights, blah, blah, blah. And the last one, he collapsed on the canvas after he beat the guy and, he could barely stand up. He had to put his arms around people, I think as far as building fighters, the UFC is doing a bad job, like building names and then preserving the name. And, they let Eddie Alvarez go. And now they had this trade with Ben Askren. And I like Ben Askren. I mean, he trains down in Milwaukee at Rufusport. I've always been partial to the wrestlers, even though I hate the way they fight, because I know how big of a bitch that is to do, to be a wrestler. And then they always seem like they just have it, even if they don't wrestle, they seem to know how to grind, how to, because they're there for 5 rounds. If they fight 5-round fights, they're there for 5 rounds because you cannot exhaust those fucking guys because of the wrestling background that they have. And I have a lot of respect for that. I don't always respect the way they fight because some of them are just, and I'm not saying Ben Askren does this. He did do it in Bellator. I don't know if he's changed his style at all because I can't see ONE FC. And that guy on Twitter who told me they have an app and it's easier than ever, I'm never going to watch it because I'm not wasting my internet on watching streaming shit because it takes like 3 gigs and I only get 30 for the month. So and that's just for 1 episode of something on fucking Netflix. So God only knows what a video that long is like. But let me finish the Anthony Smith before I get into the trade. Anthony Smith, like I said, fight Jimmy Manuel, 1 more 5-round fight. They have either, right after the fucking Gustafsson-John Jones fight, those 2 fight. Hopefully he doesn't come out with an injury, and then they build it up to the middle of the summer. In the beginning of next year, I don't know when Gustafsson fights Jones. If that's the beginning of next year, then like in March, Manuel and Smith fight. Whoever wins the Jones, because if it's Jones, they're not going to let Gustafsson fight. If it's Gustafsson, Jones is probably going to get a rematch if it's close, and then he can take his time off because if Gustafsson wins, I'd like to see him just fight Smith right away. They won't do that, but I'd like to see him fight Smith right away because like I said to you, John Jones should go away and be humbled for a little while and come back, and maybe he won't be as big of a dumbass as he is some of the time, but then they'd have a name, and then he fights. He's more prepared. He's ready to go. His name's even stronger because I don't see him losing to Jimmy Manuel. I really don't. I think he's a better fighter. I like the guy. I like his fighting style. I really like him. So for me, I think in general it would be a better situation. But what do I know? I'm not a matchmaker. I'm not a fucking promoter. It's just what I see, So I'm going to talk about the trade for a little bit just because I really am disappointed that they let Demetrius Johnson go. I can see why DJ left. He didn't get a lot of respect. And I saw this thing where he said they wanted a new 125-pound champ. Maybe the organization led you to believe that, but I like you as a 125 champ. They're not going to have a division without you. I'm pretty sure it's going to go away. A lot of people think that. It doesn't draw numbers. Nobody really wants to watch short guys fight. So go over to Asia, where apparently they like it better, and your coach happens to run like the talent acquiring division, so he's going to give you a shit ton of money, more than Eddie Alvarez gets. Which if I'm Eddie, I'm like, what the fuck, But I'm glad they got Ben Askren back. I hope he does something. I really do. I hope he comes in and makes some fucking noise. He apparently isn't going to fight Tyron Woodley because Woodley's apparently working out of Rufusport. He's been his wrestling coach, and they were teammates at Missouri. So I can see that. I don't know who Askren's going to fight. There's interesting matchups. I definitely like to see him fight GSP, but I don't think that's going to happen. He's supposedly going to fight Khabib for $50 million because that's how much Conor McGregor made. I'm not getting into that, but that would be a nice fight to see him. I think he even challenged Khabib too, which would be weird, but I think it would be an interesting. It's an interesting concept, these trades, but it really wasn't a trade. It was a guy who wanted to get the fuck out of UFC and engineered his way to get the fuck out of UFC. He never felt respected. He never felt valued. He pushed. He never felt any of that. And I hope he didn't blame the fans. As a fan, if you hear this, DJ, which he won't, but I honestly liked watching you fight. Um, you know, a lot of people don't like Alabama winning all the time. A lot of people don't like the Patriots winning championships. A lot of, people don't like those kind of dynastic things. But, I'm smart enough to understand that you're only going to see that once in your lifetime. And your reign was a once in a lifetime thing. So I'm glad that I was around to see it. I appreciate your style and the way you fought. That fucking thing you did against Ray Borg, I'll never forget that as long as I live. And go make your money. I'm disappointed that you left, but I mean, it's a financial decision. I understand that. Maybe you'll get more glory. You probably get more commercials and shit, because people actually, want to see you fight over there, I guess. You think so, anyway. And they'll put you in positions to win, because I don't really hear a lot about their talent, to be honest with you. So I don't have a high opinion of their talent base, but maybe it's better than what I think. I might just be the ignorant American on that one. And again, I've never seen ONE FC. I can't watch it, and I'm not watching the app, so don't send me Twitters about that or emails, because I get it, but I have shitty internet. I have 30 gigabytes a month, and I'm not wasting a massive amount of them watching one fight, because that's all I'll probably see, and then I'll be down to like 10 for the rest of the month, and that's just one day. So I hope Anthony Smith has one more fight against Jimmy Butler for 5 rounds. He faces, cross your fingers for Alexander Gustafsson after a rematch probably with John Jones. Because if John Jones fight, everybody's going to push for Daniel Cormier to fight light heavyweight again and fight that, go one more go round with that dipshit. And I am not here for that, because I like DC, but I'm so sick of those two together, because every time he beats him, it just, something happens, and it goes to show that, and then there's always that question, and it's not, and DC wants to beat him, and then he doesn't beat him, and I don't think DC's going to fight him because he says there's no unfinished business there, all that stuff. I think he doesn't want that question mark in his head anymore. He's like, that guy, I'm done with him, and that's good. Go fight heavyweight, And there's this thing about Josh Thompson where Cain Velasquez is fucking around and they don't know why he's not fighting. Well, there's another guy the heavyweights could use. He's going to probably go to fucking WWE because he can't get on a card, I don't know. I just don't understand. But Anthony Smith, 5 rounds, Jimmy Manuwa, set him up, then him do a title shot, and bye-bye DJ. You were a great fighter. I liked watching you fight. Let's put Askren on a card pretty soon, because I want to see what he does against some high roller in the UFC. I am going to start a new segment this week, and I'm going to take a break from the sports right now, and I'm going to do what's going to hopefully continue for the podcast. It may not always, but I tend to watch a lot of TV and movies, and it might be a TV show, but right now I'm planning on it being movie of the week. Right now, it's the movie of the week this week, and I was going to do The Gambler, which is that Mark Wahlberg movie that I talked about. Maybe I'll do that next week, but I watched Eraser day before yesterday. I love that goddamn movie. I have seen that movie probably, I can't even, well, I'll tell you the story about the Eraser movie. When I was a kid, we didn't have satellite or cable in my room. I didn't even have a TV. I had this little, I don't even think it was a 19, it wasn't a 19-inch TV. How small would that TV be? Probably like those little TVs that you could basically carry with you, almost like boom boxes with VHS in them. Like they had the VHS built right in. I had one of those TVs in my room. And my mom used to take TV away when I was badly behaved and stuff like that. And so then after a while, I got Dish in my room. Well, then she used to take I don't basically the receiver part, where the cord, the RG6 cable would come into, and then you'd have to push it to turn it on, and then that would receive the signal. Well, she used to take that fucking thing out of my room and take it away from me. So then I have the TV, and I'd just set up a VCR and I'd watch movies. And I did not have a lot of VHS tapes, but I watched them over and over and over again. I used to play Xbox. I had two TVs in my room. I had the little TV that would play the VHS, and then if I was playing Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, if she hadn't taken that away, I would play that on the bigger TV. And I probably one of the movies I had was Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Vanessa Williams, James Caan is in it, James Coburn is in it. I'm trying to think, who else would you guys know? Oh, that one guy. He's an Italian actor, and he's got dark hair, and apparently he died of a heroin overdose. God, he was a good actor. He was the guy, if you've ever seen the movie, he was the guy in the beginning that he saves who helps him later on. I can't think of the fucking guy's name. I never remember his name. Robert something, I think. I don't know. I would look it up, but then you'll hear clicking and a bunch of bullshit. So any of you who know, you're probably like, God damn it, it's this guy. Well, I don't know what the guy's name is. But anyway, there's that guy. There's the fat guy from Analyze This, the old fat, Jelly was his name in Analyze This. I have no idea who he is, but anybody who's seen Analyze This or Analyze That, they'll know him. I'm trying to think who else was in the movie that anybody would know. There's a bunch of character actors in there who are always the same kind of guys in every movie. There's the one guy that works with James Caan when they're in the plane, and he's in a lot of movies. And then there's another guy he's always like a bad guy in every movie. But now he's so old that I watched SEAL Team, which is a show with David Boreanaz, or however fuck you say that. He was Angel, and then he was on the show Bones, and it's about SEAL Team 6, SEAL Team 6, and fictionalized version. And the guy that was the heavy in Eraser, one of the bad guys that came to try to mess with Vanessa Williams, he's a senator now because he's so old he can't play a bad guy anymore, so he has to play something else. And I just think it's funny because just how age in the Hollywood in Hollywood, how it changes how you have to act. But anyway, so for those of you who don't know, in this movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger is a guy for witness protection, and he erases people's identities, and he comes and he works by himself. He only knows his roster and his boss, who's played by James Coburn. And James Caan is like his mentor, and he was around in the CIA, and then he came over to the witness protection, and he's kind of a shady character, and you don't really know that at first, but then it sort of shows up later. Then Vanessa Williams is an informant who informs on this company that she works for, and she gets involved with the FBI, who tells her, oh yeah, you'll be fine, and then she has they come after her, the bad guys come after her. Well, of course, because it's a fucking action movie, but the bad guys come after her, and, subsequent shit happens. I'm not going to ruin the movie for you, because if you haven't seen it, I genuinely think you should see it. I was talking to my cousin about it, and he's like, I don't like Schwarzenegger movies. I said, well, he's not the best actor, but I like watching his movies because of everything they have to do to distract you from, if you think if you think his acting is bad, they have to distract you from it. And so, in this movie, there's a scene in a zoo where he shoots out aquarium tanks, and alligators come out and chomp on people, and there's just huge explosions. There's a fight in a plane, and then he jumps from the plane, and some of the weaponry that's used isn't even real weaponry, and that fucking gun in that movie is awesome. I'm not going to say any more than that, but that part of it I really liked, and it's ridiculous. It's a completely ridiculous movie, but for some reason it's always resonated with me, and I probably haven't seen it in 4 or 5 years, and as I don't watch my VHS tapes anymore, which is sad. You think about that. Those things were crucial parts of my childhood. My dad didn't do a whole lot of stuff for me, but he used to buy me movies because we'd watch them together, and that was something that we had together, which we don't have a lot together, but movies were something we had together. And he he had he took he knew I took an interest in movies, and so we kind of shared that together. And I always liked that because we'd watch the movie and we'd we'd talk about it maybe or something, and so then I'd have the VHS afterwards, and I'd go to my mother's, and I'd be punished. It was also a way to get back at my mother, where she, if I was punished, she wouldn't be able to tell me what to do, and I could watch the movies and give her the finger, and I'd steal the TV and all kinds of stuff. Like there was a TV in the basement, and like, you don't touch that TV, and then she was asleep upstairs, and I'd go and take the TV and watch it in my bedroom, and then put it back before I went to bed because I'm not stupid. I'm not going to leave evidence that I did what I wasn't supposed to do. And so it makes me sad because those movies, they were a crucial part. They got me through some of the roughest parts of my life. Like up to this point, they got me through some of the roughest parts of my life, and I don't watch them anymore. I kind of abandon them. And a lot of stuff is like that. I've noticed. This is getting way off track, but I don't really enjoy those same things the way that I did because they make me sad. I don't know what I'm sad about. I'm sad about loss, or I don't know. But I hadn't seen the movie in quite a while, is the point of all of that digression. And I like watching Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, like I said, because his acting is terrible. So like Terminator and stuff like that, they have to blow a bunch of shit up. I watched Terminator Genesis this afternoon, and it's just so funny, all the shit they have to do. He is a terrible actor, so we have to blow up literally everything in the scene. And it's great. Vanessa Williams isn't my favorite, but she's pretty good in it. I love James Caan. You could put James Caan in, like, one of them stupid student film things, and I'd watch it, because I love James Caan. I don't know what it is. Godfather and that movie, and he's in Rollerball. There's another movie with him and Robert Duvall called I don't know what it's fucking called, but it's from the 70s, and it's an assassin movie that I've seen. I love James Caan. I just love his acting. He's just such a sly dick. Like he's smooth dick, I guess is what you would say, because he's somebody who's like, he'd stab you, but he'd talk to you the whole time to the way that you wouldn't even feel the knife until he walked away, and you'd be like, fuck, that hurts, and that's kind of how I feel that guy is, and then James Coburn's in it, and James Coburn's voice is one of the best things I've ever heard in my whole life. I just love James Coburn's voice, and in that movie, like, I was obsessed with James Coburn. I was obsessed just because of that movie. And I've seen some of his earlier stuff from like the 50s and some of the cowboy movies he was in. He's okay. He was real jokey. And as he got older, he got more serious. Like, he seemed like the distinguished, serious man. And his voice lent to that character better than the goofy cowboy, badass outlaw kind of dude. And, I never saw him as that guy, the guy making jokes and the guy fooling around. His voice was very, distinguished, and, I can't really do a James Coburn, but that's what I think of him as. And granted, I've seen his movies after I've seen his older movies, because he was an older man when I was younger, and I saw him in some movies. So then I see him as this white-haired, white-beard, distinguished man, and then I see him as this younger man running around, making jokes and acting like a goofball, and it's like, yeah, I don't really buy that. But that's probably just prejudice on my part. And I miss those movies, because the character actors in those movies were better. Now there is no character actors. Everybody's got to be a star. Everybody's got to have their moment in the sunlight. Everybody's got to have something, and there's these guys that I have seen. I don't know their names, but I've seen their face constantly. That one guy I was telling you about that was in the SEAL Team show now, where he's a senator, I saw him as either a cop or a bad guy. There's this young guy who there's a young guy who has something happen to him in the plane scene, and he was in The Rock with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage, and he's in that movie in a similar capacity, and I'd never seen him in anything else. Maybe I have, but he's, I've seen him. And the two guys that work with James Caan, I know both of those guys in similar roles, and I don't know. Vanessa Williams is an actress. I, she was, what was the fuck was that show? Ugly Betty. That was the show, and she made a shit ton of money, and she don't do nothing now, as far as I know. And I don't know. She's never really done it for me as an actress. There's like a veneer there, like her lines when she's talking to Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's kind of like, eh, eh, you know. But overall, it's a good movie. I mean, it's a good stupid action movie to just sit down and watch, and the plot's fairly ridiculous, and I mean, the whole thing is outlandish beyond belief. What the hell's the guy's name? He was on. Here's the thing with Alec Baldwin's podcast. I don't know, the guy who was the guy with the pig in Babe. He was the guy who ran the farm. That'll do pig. That guy, he's in the beginning of the movie. I want to say Corbett, but I know that's not it. Fuck, I don't know his name. I didn't know his name up until I saw that, and up until I heard the podcast, and then I learned his name, and I was like, oh, that's that guy's name, but I don't fucking remember. But he's in the movie in the very beginning. He's not in it for long, but he's in there. He does his little scene, and he goes away. Those guys don't exist anymore. Everybody's got to have a fairly significant arc in the movie, or they want nothing to do with it. And the movies aren't like that anymore either. That's the problem, is they don't write them like that anymore. There aren't these ancillary characters who simply move the plot along and that's it. They have to have arcs, and they have to have this ensemble bullshit that it seems like they're trying to do. And maybe I'm just generalizing, and a lot of the movies that I've seen, there aren't those guys. There aren't the simple come for 5 minutes, move the plot along, go away kind of movie that I've seen recently. But I don't, I mean, like Passengers is a movie I saw with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, and there's not a lot of people in that movie. And then Lawrence Fishburne is probably the closest thing to a character actor that shows up in there, and he moves the plot along a little bit, but he has a fairly connected story. You know what I mean? Like, these guys that are in the older movies show up literally for 2 minutes. They give you a significant piece of information, and you forget about them 5 minutes later. That's it. I mean, you don't care about them anymore. They're not integral to the story. You don't hear about them, at the end of the movie. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't know. I miss those kind of movies, and I would honestly. Now, granted, if you're looking for a dramatic turn of events, and you're looking for some wonderful piece of cinema, and you got some high and mighty, aspirations to watch your movie, don't watch this movie. It's not for you. Like The Gambler, if I go over that next week, that's more of a kind of a movie for people like that. I might read too much into that movie than I read more into that movie than I probably should, to be honest with you, The Gambler. But we'll go over that at a different time. But I genuinely, like I said, I think you should watch this movie, because it's pretty good. It's just pretty good. Just for a stupid action movie, It's got some stupidly funny lines. There's some comedy in there, and I just miss those kind of action movies. I've talked about this before, but I just miss those kind of action movies, because there's a lot to be said for that, and it just doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know. So that'll end the movie of the week segment. I'm probably gonna, like I said, I watch enough TV and movies. It might be a TV show or whatever I'm excited about that I watch, that I feel like, hey man, if you ain't seen this, you better watch it. In a disclaimer, if you're a streamer, you're going to be left out, because I do not watch Hulu. I do not watch Netflix. I don't watch Amazon Prime. I have access to Amazon Prime, and I have access to Netflix. I will not pay for fucking Hulu, which is more expensive than Dish as far as that goes, because like I said, the plan that I'm on for my internet, for me to stream fucking Hulu, would cost me $700 a month. Whatever it is for Hulu, I think it's $40 a month, plus the amount of internet that I have to use to watch as much fucking TV as I do. It would cost me probably $700 to $1,000 a month. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the amount of internet that I would need. And this way I pay for my Dish, and I can watch it as much as I want for, tenth of that, So I hope, like I said, it might be a movie, it might be TV. It probably will be longer in certain movies. The Eraser movie is just a stupid movie that I like, and And I encourage you to watch, because if you haven't seen it and if you're a younger person listening to this, it was made in like the 90s, so it was probably made when you were born. And if you're someone around my age, your parents may have forbade you from watching things with explosions, or they may have thought Arnold Schwarzenegger was too lowbrow for you because they're highfalutin or whatever. I'm not chastising your parents. I'm just saying that's some of the things that I know that people say about stuff like that, because they're like, well, that movie will rot your brain. That's what they used to say about TV too. And I mean, you can watch a lot of TV and not rot your brain. They're fucking idiots who said that. But I think it's definitely worth checking out. It just it's probably about as long as my podcast, my last one. This one's probably going to be a little longer because I went on for quite a. I feel like I went on a long time. I can't really tell how long I've been going, but I think I'm going to talk about the World Series now. And if you're coming here for baseball coverage, you're going to be sad, because I hate the World Series at this point. That game, I watched like 3 innings, and it felt like I posted this on Twitter because Andy Kindler and J. Elvis Weinstein have this podcast, Thought Spiral, and I've been following J. Elvis Weinstein on Twitter, and he was talking about how he said something like, I feel like I've been up for 4 days watching this game, and I'm like, I know exactly how you feel. I sent this back. He probably didn't care how I feel, but I sent this back, and I said, I've been up for. I watched like 3 innings. I felt like it took 12 hours off my fucking life. I mean, it's just horrible. Baseball is so fucking boring. Jesus Christ. I mean, I talked about the Brewers when they were playing the Dodgers in the NCLS, and that was one of my least energized segments ever, because I don't care. I honestly don't care, and that might put me as a sports fan at a disadvantage. Like, I honestly, everybody hates the regular season. I'd rather watch during the regular season because there's nothing else to watch. That keeps me interested. There is nothing, like, there's no, like, UFC still going on, and there's other sports, but like football and basketball are not going on. The trade deadline wasn't this weekend. Yeah, it wasn't this week. The basketball season didn't start with Jimmy Butler and his bullshit, which I'm going to talk about after this. There's there wasn't, the football games were not on Sunday. I mean, baseball has my attention in the summer. Once that goes away, and it's fucking cliche. I know that. I mean, I'm not fooled by that. But there's 162 fucking games, and then they play well in, like, they almost played in the fucking November. Get the fuck. I don't care if you have 162 games, but get the fucking season over before like October. Like the first week in October should be the last of the games. Like, if you go into the second week of October, that should be game 7, and that's it. Football has expanded its territory. Basketball has too. So they're kind of encroaching on each other. And honestly, if it was me and I had my way, we would have individual seasons that didn't encroach on each other. Like they did a little bit, but in the very beginning of seasons, you don't really care. And at the very end of seasons, you care more, supposedly. Well, baseball, I don't care about it in the beginning of this. I care about it a little bit in the beginning of the season because basketball is still kind of going on. But towards like June, then I get involved because, well, it's the NBA Finals and that's it. And usually I don't watch the NBA Finals because the Warriors are in it, and I've discussed how I think they're assholes and I don't want to watch them win. So I don't even watch it. I just like watch, and if, they lost? Fuck, I'm going to turn that game on. Like, I didn't watch game 1 last year, so I didn't get to see the Cavaliers almost win and J.R. Smith fuck it up. Like, had I watched that, I'd have been depressed because, like I've said before, I'm a Cavalier fan. I like LeBron. Well, I'm not a Cavalier fan. I'm a LeBron fan, so I was a Cavalier fan. Now I'm sort of a Laker fan, but I don't really like the Lakers because of I don't like their team construct right now. And I don't like the whole, like, I like Jerry Buss, but then once he died, his kids are kind of dumb. I don't really agree with what they're doing. But they got LeBron, and Magic is helping, so hopefully it works out for LeBron. That's all I care about. Anyway, the point being is that, the World Series is just, it's mercifully over. That's what I wrote down, and that's how I feel. It is mercifully over. I don't have to hear about baseball anymore. We're getting to the best part of baseball, which is the off season and the movement and all that. I love the off season movement. Oh, it's just, I love transactions. I know that's a bullshit thing too, but I do. I love them, and they're so much better. Like the baseball transaction, I've talked about this. It's better than almost anyone because you can get like 25 people going from one team to another, in a trade. It's not that many, but it's a large deal, and in football, they traded Ty Montgomery for a sixth round pick or a seventh round pick. They traded, Clinton Dix for a fourth round pick. They traded Eli Apple for a couple of draft. Like, they don't trade people for people. They trade people for draft picks. Well, because they have such huge farm systems in baseball, they trade people for people. And so then you get something. You have a quantifiable return. And I enjoy that. I really do. Because then you can, it's kind of why, finance and that kind of stuff interests me, because you can speculate, you can do this, you can do that. I genuinely think, though, that it's getting into its best season, and I'm so glad the fucking World Series. I don't care. I don't like Boston because in the AL I'm a Yankee fan, and in the NL I'm a Brewers fan. So the Brewers lost to the Dodgers, who are like fucking huge juggernauts in the money department, and then the fucking Red Sox won, and they beat the Yankees, and I don't care about that because I hate the fucking Red Sox. And they've won all the time now. It's just dumb. And I'm not begrudging them winning, because if the Yankees won that much, I wouldn't be like, oh, they won all the time. Fuck them. I just don't like the Yankees. Like, I like Chris Sale. I wanted the Yankees to come. I liked David Price until he started fighting with the media, because he is he kind of fought like a dum-dum. Craig Kimbrell is an interesting guy. Mookie Betts, the thing I know about him is that he's a really good bowler. I mean, he's a good baseball player, but I know he's like a super good bowler. I don't know why that's important, but that's what I know about him. J.D. Martinez, I have no idea where he came from and how the fuck he's that good. Andrew Benintendi is one of those guys with a name like that who I'm like, that guy's gonna fucking suck, because there's so many guys with names like that, and I'm not saying, but it's a name that is unique. Like Benintendi is a unique name. Andrew Benintendi, that's a unique name. There's guys like that, Matt Laporta, stuff like that, where I heard their name and I've always remembered them, and they were high prospects, and then they were nothing, And I always, so I thought about Benintendi. I was like, that guy's gonna flame out. He sucks, Xander Bogaerts, same thing. Mookie Betts, it's not that, I mean, it's weird, but it's not that weird. And I just thought Bogarts and those guys, I don't know. I don't like the Red Sox. So I'm not interested. I wasn't interested in the World Series. And then when I did watch it, it was like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours per inning. And I'm like, this is atrociously bad. Who watched? And like the fucking Dodgers, their outfield used to be, Matt Kemp, Andrew Ethier, Carl Crawford, Yasiel Puig, those guys that you knew, and now they got, Bellinger, and they're doing, and then I got to hear about this fucking analytic bullshit. If I hear one more time about a manager that's getting hired because he's analytically based, and he basically listens to what the general manager sends down the lineup card, and he says, this is what our computer said you're supposed to put out there, so put it out there, and he does it. I don't care. Who fucking cares about that? Like, do I really need to see how the sausage is made? Yeah, it used to be the manager made the card, and it was some kind of mystery. The guy was like, oh yeah, he figured it out. Blah, blah, blah. Maybe that went on then too. You wouldn't fucking know. But basically, you got to be the GM's bitch to get a manager job, is what I'm hearing, from all the sports writers when they talk about, managerial hirings. And it's just bullshit. One thing that happened, though, from baseball that was interesting is Rocco Baldelli got the Twins job. He's only 37, and he got the Twins job. I loved Rocco Baldelli as a kid. He was so fucking fast, man. Whoo, that boy could run. And I remember watching him, and he got hurt all the time. I mean, it was every year. It was like he'd be speeding down the base, and all of a sudden, like, his fucking leg would just go off in front of them, and it's like, God damn it, Rocco, you got hurt again. I was a Tampa Bay Ray fan. I loved their outfield. Him, Carl Crawford. I just, oh man, I was a Ray fan just because of some of the guys that they had. And I wanted Ball. I remember when I used to play the baseball game, I'd trade Baldelli to the Yankees every time. He seemed like such a perfect Yankee player. Fucking killed him a couple of times in games that I watched. But, like, I'm more interested in manager movement than I am in the fucking World Series. I couldn't tell you anything about the World Series. I could tell you nothing. I know David Price pitched well and Clayton Kershaw stinks in the postseason. But the Kershaw thing isn't new. And I heard this thing about how Kershaw is it's part of him aging because his fastball isn't as fast, and if his breaking stuff isn't on, then he's fucked. And I have the fact that you watch that closely to know that shit. They pitch so much. They pitch so much against the same fucking teams. The one thing they did talk about, which pisses me off and I agree with, is the designated hitter, non-designated hitter bullshit. Fucking pick one. I prefer designated hitter. Why the fuck would the pitcher hit? He's out there to throw. You know? If he wants to fucking hit and he's a good hitter, then pinch hit him one of the fucking innings, when he's not pitching. Shohei Ohtani wants to be a pitcher and a designated hitter. Fine, let him fucking designated hit. Then on days he doesn't pitch, he can hit if he wants. Guys can do that. You can do it that way. If he's got a good bat, throw him out as a designated hitter. He doesn't have to field. He doesn't have to put himself in the harm's way. He just has to hit the fucking ball. And hopefully he jacks a home run. I don't like the idea of the pitcher hitting because then, being forced to hit, because some of them look atrociously bad. Some of them are not athletes, so them running down fucking first base is in that way, because they're just, I just don't look, they look like giraffes or horses learning how to walk for the first. It's hard to watch, and I don't know. I just see it as a significant disadvantage. Especially when you're a National League team playing an American League team and you got to trot a guy out there who's like, okay, what position? Oh, that's right, I got to sit on the bench. Because that's especially a specialty, David Ortiz sucked as a fielder. He was much better as a designated hitter. Because he just sat around and waited to hit because that's all he wanted to do, probably. There's guys that are built for it. Other guys aren't. And there's guys who are built to pitch. They aren't fucking built to hit. So let them fucking pitch. Let the guys who are built to hit for them. I just think, and if you don't want to do it that way, you want to make the pitchers hit, then make the fucking pitchers hit. I don't care, but pick one. Stop this bullshit where you have one is one and the other one's the other one. What kind of, disproportionate bullshit is that to have in a professional league? Basketball doesn't do that. Like, the fucking, the West doesn't have 6 players on the court, and the East doesn't have, 5 in basketball. You're not running down... You're not having like the designated quarterback in football where one guy for both teams is the quarterback. It's stupid. I don't know. I just think it's stupid, and they should fix that. And yeah, if you're coming here for baseball coverage, I know the World Series just ended, but no. I watched like 3 innings and it took forever. And I was like, I'm not watching this anymore. Because the Brewers lost to the fucking Dodgers, who got $12 billion in payroll. And then the Yankees lost to the Red Sox, who got like $12 trillion in payroll. And everybody said the Red Sox were going to win because they were the best fucking team all year. They won a bunch of games. They were the best team. So they should have won the World Series. And they did. So who cares? Although, then they had the parade, and then a guy threw beer cans, hit the manager, and bent the fucking trophy. Which, if that's not perfect Boston celebration, I don't know what is. Hey, we got this shiny metal thing, that's the trophy. Oh, fuck, you threw something at it and bent it. Oops. Well, fuck it. We'll hit the manager, too. The fuck? I don't know. I don't know anything about Boston, but it just seems like the way they celebrate out there. So I'm going to finish with Jimmy Butler. And I'm kind of floating out there because I did an afternoon taping of my podcast, and I think I should do that. But I had stuff going on this afternoon, so I didn't have time. And it's later at night. I don't even know what time it is now. Hang on, let me check. Yeah, it's pretty late already. And I probably should tape this in the afternoon because by the end, I'm not yawning as much, so that's good. I took a little nap this afternoon. I was really tired when I came home, and I took a little nap, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I don't have the same push through to get to the end because I'm at the end now, and I still want to talk about Jimmy Butler, but I kind of feel I feel drowsy, and I don't know if you can tell or if I'm assuming my energy dips because I kind of go all over. Like right now, I'm way the fuck off in left field where I should just get into the topic, start talking about it instead of this big fucking diatribe that I'm on about how I'm tired. But that's what happens when I'm tired because my brain just starts going, "Hey, shiny," you know. But I did want to finish with Jimmy Butler. I have Giannis's concussion on here, which they might have played him through a concussion. It's basketball. Who fucking cares? I mean, this isn't football. He doesn't get concussions on a regular basis. And if he felt fine enough to play, unless they hit him in the face with the basketball like 16 times in that game, which I don't think happened, it's probably not good for him to run and do that stuff. But it's not like football where he gets a concussion and he goes back out there and he's going to start smashing heads with guys again. You know, them to get a concussion in basketball is fairly irregular. You know, it's not a common occurrence. So anybody who's all up, I saw it on PBT, which is Pro Basketball Talk, where they're like, "Oh, did they play Giannis through a concussion?" Oh. And one more basketball note, there's a thing about Darius Miles, who, if none of you know who Darius Miles is, he was a really good high school basketball player, got drafted by the Clippers. It was a team I was obsessed with as a young kid. And it's a fairly interesting article. It's worth a read. You can find him on Twitter, and the article's there. I think it was with the Players Tribune that he wrote that. You should check it out. It's pretty interesting. I'll probably talk about that some more next week. Anyway, to finish up with Jimmy Butler, how the fuck is this still going on? Jesus Christ, I talked about Jimmy Butler in my first episode. That was 6 fucking weeks ago. How the hell have they not solved this yet? And now Jimmy Butler's holding out supposedly. And then the team came out and they said, no. We said he was going to rest tonight. So he's not holding out. He'll be with the team tomorrow. And everybody in the Twitter sphere and everywhere else is like, aha, sure, he's sitting out, you dum-dums. How stupid do you think we are? Okay, here's what I'm going to say. The game already ended before I started the podcast, and Derrick Rose scored over 50 points. He balled out of his mind tonight, okay? I think they played the Jazz, who a lot of people think highly of in the Western Conference. And that may be the case. They might be a really good team. But Derrick Rose is kicking their ass, okay? And everybody said he looks the most athletic he has. He can probably on nights now. I think he's 30, just 30, but he's 30. And he's had significant knee injuries. He's been significantly hurt. He might have weeks where he can do this. He might have, stretches 3, 4, 5 games where he can do this. But he's not going to continue it, and they need Jimmy Butler. But the thing came out about the Rockets later last week, where they offered 4 first-round draft picks for Jimmy Butler, and they wanted to the Rockets did because they're off to a terrible start and they stink, and they were going to offer Brandon Knight and Marquise Chris to offset the salary, and I mean they don't want Brandon Knight, they want Eric Gordon, and they're not going to give him Eric Gordon, so they're probably not going to get Jimmy Butler. But I think Jimmy Butler saw that and is like, okay, let's do that. That's a good deal for you, and I don't want to be here anymore, so fuck off. And he's like, and they're like, oh, we're not going to do that. And he's like, okay, you had a significant deal on the table and you fucked me over, so why don't you go away? I'm leaving. And I remember him talking how he was going to play and all this. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns had a good game tonight. Derrick Rose had a good game. They don't necessarily need him. I mean, granted, he's a good player. He helps on the basketball court, all of that stuff. But if he's going to cause this much trouble, like Mark Stein was like, this Wolves season is unbelievable. And I asked him a question. I don't know if he answered it because I didn't look at Twitter before. I didn't give it enough time. He probably didn't answer it because who fucking answers me? But I said, well, can they just let Jimmy stay out then? Like Kawhi did last year? Like, fuck off. Just go sit out there and don't play then. Because we don't have to trade you. And we don't have to play you. and we can just tell you to go fuck yourself. And I think that is a viable option if it was me. I mean, because he's done enough damage now to the point where if somebody's offering me 4 first-round draft picks, Brandon Knight and Marquise Chris, I'm probably taking that. I mean, the guy that they got with Jimmy Butler, Justin Patton, was a center. He's broke his foot, and his third-year option declined today. And they're like, yeah, that's really uncommon, and he's been hurt and all this other stuff. And I think he broke his foot again. I don't know, but he's not playing. And so they got Jimmy Butler, and the Bulls got Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and I think that's somebody else too. I don't know who the other guy was. I can't remember, but it's not important. The point is the guys that I named are all significant players for their team. Chris Dunn's kind of an asshole, according to what I heard in the offseason, but he might be better. I don't know. They picked up all their fucking options. I mean, they're on the team, and the Bulls are a young squad with a lot of fairly highly drafted guys. If they can keep that core together for cheaper, and they added Jabari Parker. Now, if it was me, I would have signed Jahlil Okafor because he's from Chicago, and Robin Lopez is no better than he is. But I'm not involved in the. I'm not getting involved in the Bulls thing. The point is that I think the Bulls got the Wolves feel they got taken, and all they've got to show for this draft, this pick is Jimmy Butler, and now they don't want to let him go without getting something for it. Well, at the end of the day, Jimmy Butler is causing you massive amounts of headaches, massive amounts of trouble. If you're going to get 4 first-round draft picks, and I heard somewhere that you can't offer it in consecutive years, so it's 4 first-round draft picks over 8 years. Well, if in 8 years you're going to get 4 first-round draft picks, Brandon Knight's supposedly going to not be injured at some point, and Marquise Chris, I think, was like 4th overall at one point. I mean, he might be better for you with Karl-Anthony Towns than he was with anybody else. I mean, it's the second time he's been traded this year. Might fuck up his confidence as a younger player, but I just think you got to do it. Get rid of him. You can ask for Eric Gordon, but if they don't want to give you Eric Gordon, at the end of the day, Jimmy Butler's causing trouble. Jimmy Butler's now more of a detriment. He's not even playing anymore. If he holds out more than one game, I'm just like, you know what, Jimmy, go away. I've had it with you. I know Tom Thibodeau wants to win. I know Tom Thibodeau's afraid he's going to lose his job, and I know he thinks Jimmy Butler's crucial to his success. But after tonight, with Derrick Rose scoring 50 points and stuff like that, you could see how they could say, well, maybe we have enough pieces. I don't think Derrick Rose is the answer. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that if he can put nights like that together occasionally, and Karl-Anthony Towns becomes Karl-Anthony Towns again. Granted, right now Wiggins is hurt. I don't know if he's back yet, but he was hurt against the Bucks when they played, and he was hurt the game after that because I saw that on Hoops Hype. I haven't really been covering the Timberwolves as closely as I should be because I'm pretty much over the Jimmy Butler situation. I mean, this is simple to me. Get rid of him. Find the best deal you can get and take it. I mean, now the Rockets are in a bad position. They're giving you the fucking farm for the guy, and they think, well, we're going to ask for more. The first round draft picks, the NBA, it's a crapshoot. I mean, it really is. Outside of they say 3 or 4, it's a shit show as to who you're going to get. You look at it. They drafted Lauri Markkanen, and I think they were 11th when they drafted that Justin Patton, and I think he played at Creighton, if I'm not mistaken, or Dayton or something with a ton in it. I don't remember exactly whom, but he played somewhere like that. And he's now broken his foot. Centers are most replaceable. Bye. Okay, we're done with you. If you ask me, and nobody has, but this is my podcast, so I ask myself, Aaron, what would you do? Well, thank you. What I would do is I would say to the Rockets, I'd say, okay, you're going to give me first round picks. You're going to give me Brandon Knight and Marquise Chris. I would try to figure out a way to get them to take somebody else that I don't want on my team anymore. Open up a roster spot, and then go and use some of those picks to package it into somebody else. Now, you may not be able to do that, but 2 first-round draft picks. Now, you have 2 first-round draft picks in a certain year. So you can trade 2, or you can just trade 1. And then you can trade yours from the year after that, So, okay, saying 2020 is when that pick, it's next. So it'll be 19, 21, 23, and 25. So in 21, you decide to trade your pick, and you also trade him the 2020 pick of yours. Because you're hoping that the guy you get will win you a championship. And also, if it's a Rockets pick, it's going to be awful fucking low anyway. But the point is more bites at the apple, they think they're going to get a better shot at getting somebody who will contribute. I necessarily don't think that's really the smartest, but you could possibly you could take the basically, you look at it from like a financial standpoint. As far as I'm concerned, Jimmy Butler's a depreciating asset. 29 years old, attitude problems, doesn't want to play on your fucking team. That seems like a big problem to me. You take Jimmy Butler, and if you can turn him into 4 first-round draft picks, which are only appreciating in value because speculating into the future always appreciates in value, even for lower-round draft picks. And if you can get out far enough, like 2025, you can trade those picks, and who knows, the Houston Rockets might be contending for the first overall pick. You don't know, because James Harden's 29, Chris Paul's 33, Jimmy Butler's 29, I think Eric Gordon's 26, Clint Capella's 25. I don't know who else they have on the team. Fuck, PJ Tucker's like 30-something. Who else is on their team? Oh, Carmelo Anthony. He's really old. He's like 30, 33 as far as basketball years. I got to stop saying that because then I think I'm fucking old. But those guys in basketball years are fucking ancient. And so in 2025, that's how many years from now? I mean, that's 7 fucking years from now. Chris Paul will be 40. He ain't going to be playing basketball no more. So what you do is you get out that far. You get people excited about the picks. Maybe trade your own fucking pick. And then, bada bing, bada boom, you get, a sufficient replacement level player for Jimmy Butler, who might be a little bit younger, who has a better contract, stuff like that. That's the way I look at it, because you go from a bad situation to a better situation to try to making it the best situation. And Tom Thibodeau is thinking short-term and small right now, and it's hurting himself because Jimmy Butler's hurting his team. I mean, it looks like it to me because he's not there, and they played really well, and they won the fucking game. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns, I think he was like 26 and 18 or something like that tonight. Fucking Derrick Rose had 51 points, a career high. I mean, Jimmy Butler's gone, and guys are blowing up. Okay? So obviously he's having a problem on this team. I watched Karl-Anthony Towns. I watched the game they played against the Timberwolves. He played like shit. And Brook Lopez sucks on defense. Offensively, he's, better than a lot of people at center. But he sucks defensively. And Karl-Anthony Towns just kind of sat around and, he's always jogging up and down the court. And somebody should tell him that he kind of needs to keep his mouth closed when he's walking around, because that's not a good look on anybody. And he looks like that mopey dog on one of those shows because he looks like that to me. Like, he looks like he's fucking depressed when he's running around with his mouth hanging open, and he looks depressed. And when his mouth is closed, he doesn't look as depressed, but he still looks, he looks depressed to me. Like, every time I see him, he looks depressed. Every look that he's got is, I talked about in my last podcast about how depression is a constant battle and there's levels to the game. He looks like, at certain points, with his mouth open, he looks like he's ready to commit suicide. And with when he closes his mouth and he's, just standing there, he looks like, okay, this is terrible. I mean, he looks horrible right now. He looks run down. He looks depressed. He looks horrible. And I really think that has a lot to do with the situation with Jimmy Butler, because I think Jimmy Butler hates Karl-Anthony Towns. He likes Wiggins better than he likes Towns, but because Wiggins is like, fuck off, dog. I don't care. Like, fuck you. He just doesn't listen to him. And I think Karl-Anthony Towns is way too sensitive for that shit. So it fucks him up. And I get that. I get it. But he just kind of needs to watch how he looks in front of cameras and stuff, because it's not a good look, man. You're a professional basketball player. You're a grown man.
I mean, he's young yet. He's not super old, as far as even like basketball years. He's been around a while, but he ain't been around that long. And Jimmy Butler's apparently a hard-nosed motherfucker, and that's hard to deal with. But when there's cameras, and he was walking to the locker room when he did that, and he came around a corner out of the door, and he looked terrible. He's just mouthing. You'd swear to God he was sick or something. I mean, he looked it was bad. It was a bad look for him. And I don't know if he's cognizant of that or not, or if he even gives a shit. But
yeah, so like I said, if you want to get a hold of me, you have any questions, comments, whatever. Like I've said, most podcasts when I've said this, don't be an asshole. I will not engage with you. More than likely, you'll probably just get blocked because I don't have any interest in fighting with people. I have more than enough people to fight with. Thank you very much. In real life. And I don't need fake, Twitter fights or emails from dickheads or, people being sanctimonious. None of that interests me. But like I said, if you would like to get a hold of me, you have interest in questions, comments, whatever, you can find my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Enlightened Misanthrope. It's all there. Email. I think it's the Enlightened Misanthrope at Gmail. I don't really know the email because I don't really use it very much. I check it, but I get emails from like past podcasting, apps that we were going to use that wanted a ridiculous amount of money and weren't going to give us any gigabytes. So if you want to get a hold of me, I would recommend going to SoundCloud and then going from there. Otherwise, Twitter is a really good place. I've been posting the YouTube links and, iTunes. You can find us on iTunes. I have myself in my own iTunes, so it's pretty interesting. But, yeah. So, until next time, I hope you all have a good week, and we shall see you for episode 7.